Welcome to Wire D. We're here helping millions understand the money behind America's biggest stories. Because, every dollar has a story. And today, we're decoding a massive one in our new explainer. We are looking at a system that touches almost every single family in the country, a system that fundamentally reshaped the American middle class and completely changed what it means to chase success in the modern economy. All right, let's just dive right in. We all know the story, right? Imagine an ambitious 18-year-old sitting at the kitchen table, holding that thick college acceptance envelope, feeling incredibly proud and just full of hope. For decades, society, our parents, and our broader culture have sold this exact promise. Go to college, get a degree, and you'll have a better life. And it's a beautiful promise. Education was, and honestly still is, seen as this ultimate equalizer and the guaranteed ticket to achieving your dreams. But man, a massive disconnect hits a few years later. On one side, you have the expectation, graduation day optimism, stepping right into that dream job, and finally having financial freedom. But on the other side, we see the reality for millions of graduates. The dream job never quite arrives, or maybe it just pays a really low entry-level salary while those monthly student loan payments officially begin. Suddenly, folks in their late 20s or even their 30s find themselves renting way longer, feeling totally stressed out, and still paying for monumental financial decisions they made when they were barely teenagers. So that brings us to the core of today's decode. How exactly did borrowing for opportunity turn into a lifelong financial obligation for literally millions of Americans? Now, I want to be super clear right out of the gate. This explainer, it's not about blaming students for wanting a better life, and it's definitely not about attacking universities or the government. Instead, we're going to impartially uncover the complex economic systems and incentives that over time turned ambition into a massive debt machine. Let's look at part one, the price of a dream and the psychology of ambition. To really understand this debt, we got to understand the mindset first. We're talking about the American college dream, where this intense fear of falling behind your peers, combined with the sheer prestige of a degree, made higher education the default, unquestioned path for an entire generation. And think about this sheer irony here. At 18, a lot of Americans cannot legally rent a car with massive restrictions and crazy extra fees. Rental companies look at an 18-year-old and they're like, no way, too risky. But those exact same intelligent teenagers can just sign a paper and borrow tens of thousands of dollars for their education. It's almost funny, right? Until you realize that we are basically asking kids to enter into 20-year financial relationships with lenders before they've even earned their very first full-time paycheck. So what are they actually signing up for? Well, whether we're talking federal or private student loans, these aren't just, simple IOUs between buddies. They are highly complex financial vehicles. You're funding your life today based entirely on your future unearned income. And the real kicker? These loans compound with interest over time, effectively locking borrowers into these rigid repayment structures that are incredibly difficult to escape, even in extreme scenarios like bankruptcy. Now, you're probably thinking, well, tuition just got ridiculously expensive, right? That's the problem. And yes, absolutely it did. But here is a totally wild reality for you. Tuition increases aren't actually the biggest reason student debt exploded to the crisis level it is today. So what is? To understand the real issue, we have to look right past the sticker price of tuition and examine how the trap was truly set. That brings us to section 2, how the trap was set and following the incentives. Look, this massive explosion in costs didn't just happen in a vacuum. It wasn't some oopsie accident. It was the direct result of overlapping systems acting exactly as they were incentivized to act by the market. Over the last few decades, college tuition costs just skyrocketed, while middle-class wages basically flatlined. Why did this massive gap open up? Mainly because of dangerously easy access to loans. When literally anyone can easily borrow massive amounts of money, regardless of their credit history or what major they pick, universities have a huge economic incentive to raise prices. They expanded their administrations, built luxury dorms, and bumped up amenities to attract students, knowing that loan money would just keep rolling in. Tuition outpaced wage growth simply because the system allowed it to. And the consequence of all this? $1.7 trillion. Yeah, trillion with a T. That is the total U.S. student debt balance. It's staggering. It impacts millions of people across almost every single demographic in the country. What started out as this noble societal good, educating the population for a better future, has completely morphed into an overwhelming burden for working and middle-class families everywhere. So if it's such a crushing burden on the average person, we gotta ask, who actually benefits? If we just step back and look impartially at the economic incentives, it becomes pretty crystal clear. Universities benefit from guaranteed upfront tuition funding. Lenders benefit from consistent, compounded interest revenue stretching over decades. Government systems benefit from the massive debt servicing apparatus. And employers, well, they get a highly filtered applicant pool that comes pre-trained without the company having to spend a dime on training themselves. A whole lot of major institutions directly benefit from keeping this status quo of debt-financed education rolling right along. But here is where the story gets deeply, deeply personal for everyday Americans. What if the biggest cost of student debt isn't actually the debt itself? The most expensive part of a college degree isn't what happens during those 4 years on campus. It's the compounding sacrifices you're forced to make over the next 20 years of your adult life. Which leads into part 3. The hidden cost of ambition, and the very real human impact. Because the reality on the ground translates to intense financial stress, serious career restrictions, and a massive delay in wealth building for the American middle class. Think about it. At 18, you sign the loan. You're full of hope. At 22, you graduate ready to take on the world. But then look at age 30. Homeownership is delayed because you literally can't scrape together a down payment. Age 35, delayed marriage and family formation because of that lingering heavy financial stress. Age 40, you're still repaying. Student debt basically acts as an anchor. It keeps graduates renting longer, it delays the start of their independent adult lives, and it so often forces people into jobs they absolutely don't love just so they can make that monthly payment. Now we have to ask a really provocative question, one that connects directly to the core of wealth building. What if educational debt is actually housing debt? I know, it sounds totally crazy at first, right? But let's break down the mechanics of why this is absolutely true. Let's unpack that in Section 4, the housing market connection, or debt by another name. This is absolutely critical to grasp if you want to build wealth. When you're trapped in this cycle of student loan repayment, you are effectively sidelined from entering the real estate market at the most crucial time in your life. This is where the rubber meets the road. If you want to buy a house, the bank looks at your mortgage qualification, which is immediately severely restricted by your student loans. Why? It's all about your debt-to-income ratio. Those hefty monthly loan payments completely wreck that ratio, making you look like a massive risk on paper. And then there's your down payment savings. The actual cash you need to buy a home is just constantly being drained every single month by your student loan servicer, meaning that for a whole generation, educational debt very quickly becomes housing debt by another name. So how do we fix this? Let's move to Section 5, breaking the debt cycle, and some practical paths forward. Okay, we've outlined the problem, and yeah, it is heavy. But what can ordinary people realistically do to navigate or even avoid this trap entirely without just giving up on their dreams? Now, we aren't giving individualized financial advice here, but it is so vital to know that the traditional, hyper-expensive 4-year university is absolutely no longer the only default path to success. Exploring alternative routes, like hitting a community college for your first 2 years, diving into really high-paying trade apprenticeships, seeking out employer-sponsored education where a company actually pays for your degree, or just getting highly targeted tech certifications, these can provide the exact same career mobility, but completely without those crippling decades of debt. And look, if you are going to borrow, or maybe you already have, here is how you manage this ambition trap. First up, and this is huge, you've got to conduct a strict career ROI, return on investment evaluation, before you borrow a dime. You have to treat education as a cold, hard financial investment. Ask yourself, what is the realistic starting salary of this specific degree compared to the total loan amount? You need to build early budget awareness, really understand how debt management and repayment structures work in the real world, and hey, explore refinancing concepts if you're already in the repayment phase. By just calculating these factors before signing anything, students and parents can drastically change their financial trajectory. So, how does all of this shape the future of higher education? Well, we're essentially looking at 3 potential realities. In an optimistic scenario, we see real structural reform, true pricing transparency, and alternative education paths just flourishing as people finally wake up to the costs. A neutral future that sees the current system slowly adapting to market pressures as enrollment just naturally starts to drop off. But the pessimistic view, debt balances continue to rise, locking out even more generations from ever becoming first-time homebuyers. Looking ahead at these 3 futures shows us exactly why your individual financial awareness is more critical today than it has ever been. All right, let's bring it all together. The main takeaways from this explainer are pretty clear. Yes, your ambition was totally monetized by systemic incentives you had literally no control over. And yes, educational debt directly limits housing wealth and delays your entire adult life. But non-traditional paths are becoming more viable and way more respected every single day. And most importantly, informed financial decisions empower your future. You actually have agency here. Understanding the system is the very first step to beating it. Which leaves us with one final, vital question to really ponder. Are you going to let your ambition be monetized by a system designed to just extract interest from you? Or will you take a step back and calculate the true long-term cost of your dreams? Before you sign away 20 years of your future earnings, sit down, run the numbers, and ask yourself what true success and true financial freedom really looks like for you.
Thanks so much for watching this WIT explainer. We really hope it gave you the perspective you need to make the best choices for your life and your wealth. Remember, every dollar has a story, and now you know this one. We'll see you in the next decode.